Another way we can look at this, not just the max and min here, but we can also think about the error in velocity, the uncertainty in velocity. So we'll wrap this text a little bit. So I'm going to make this velocity error. And this is still in boards per second. All right, so what I want to think about is how much the difference is between these. So we can pull some graphs out of the way a little bit. I'm going to calculate the difference between how far apart my velocity is from the min. So it's 0.588 away. All right, I'm also going to calculate how far away the velocity is from the max. I'll subtract this, the max minus the actual velocity. And what we notice is here is that these are the same. So what we call this is called symmetrical error. So as we notice that there's always the same here. So we can simplify this and just say, hey, since these are always the same, it's a symmetric error, we're just going to calculate 1 and use that. So I'm going to delete out this column here. But I'm going to keep these, and this one I'm going to use as my velocity error. So again, I'll fill this down all the way here. And now we want to maybe graph this. One thing that Google Sheets can't do that Excel can is have different size error bars. We can take this velocity graph and we can put error bars on it. So I'll get this up here where we can see the titles. And one way we can do that is to edit text. And if we go to Customize and our series, what we can do here is we can add error bars, but we can only add a certain value, or here's a percentage. So these are our options, constant, percent, or standard deviation. So right now if we look at constant, and if we look at our values here, our errors tended to be they're all over the place. But let's just look here. We'll just put a 1 in here to see what happens. And, oh, I did it to the wrong one. We want to do this to our, not to all series, but just to the velocity. And we'll put a constant value of 1 in there for the error bars. And so you can see how there's error bars made, but they're not always in between the actual error points we have. You know, there's different ways you can try to get around it. In Excel, on a PC or a Mac, a computer, you can actually have different error bars for different points, and that can be very useful. We're a little bit tricky here. We got to try to figure out how to get around that. One thing we can look at is we also have this percent error. So if we look at that and say, okay, let's say it's a 10% error. We don't want to leave the data, it's a little messy. You can see how these are different. My question is when we had a small velocity down here, are we going to have smaller data points? And if we do that, look, the error bars are much smaller over here than they are up here. So maybe we can use that to our advantage. So let's look over here and calculate the percent error. Percent, what should I say? Velocity percent error. And this is going to be in a percentage. And we can find that by saying what percentage of this velocity error is it of the original velocity. So to find percentage, we take the value we have and we divide by what the value of the velocity is there. And then we can multiply by 100%. So right here we're at a 50% error. So 5.588 is 50% of 1.17. And if we calculate this down, we can see that here we are at a 50% error at the beginning, and then it drops to a 20%. Why does that happen? Well, this one had the smaller interval distance, and so the same uncertainty is going to make a bigger error if you have a smaller distance you're starting with. But we can use this to our advantage here, because when we look at this graph here, we say, look, if we put in a 20% error, that'll actually be pretty representative of what we're trying to do. So if we go back to series here, the velocity, and now in here I go 20% error. Now it looks like these error bars are lined up pretty well with what we want. So at this point, I'm even going to go a little step further here. I'm going to paste this in here, and I'm going to edit this graph here. Now that I have error bars, I don't need this minimum anymore. I don't need this maximum anymore. So now we have a lot cleaner graph to look at. Again, it didn't work for this first point. We got to kind of remember that in there. The error is a little bit different. And now we can begin to discuss, what does this error really mean?